Welcome to HEX Episode 4. So we recently hosted Houdini Hive Europe, which was actually a combination of two hives, one in conjunction with Off Barcelona Conference and one in conjunction with the FMX Conference. The talks from both of those hives are available to watch on SideFX.com. And speaking of the FMX Conference, 3 of the talks that day focused on Houdini's Solaris lighting, layout, and look dev functionality. We'll talk with the presenters of those talks in the first segment of the HEX. Next up, a CG artist by the name of Wolfram Neuer created a beautiful environment scene, and he'll take us through that. Then Fiona Wong talks with SideFX developer Jeff Lait about life, the universe, and everything. Then Simon Verstraat, Rob Stauffer, and myself take you through the latest on Project Titan. Robert McGee talks with Mark Spevik from London's Escape Studios about a VFX course they're offering this summer. And finally, Ben Mears speaks with indie game developer Nick Owens about his game Frameshift. Let's jump in. Hey, it's Chris from SideFX. So we recently hosted a Houdini Hive as part of FMX, and 3 of those sessions during that Hive focused on Solaris and the implementation of Solaris in the pipeline. One of those was by Swiss's Andreas Weidman, who joins us today. So let's talk about your implementation of Solaris. Why did you choose to do that? Why did you choose to go with Solaris?
Well, I think a lot of people would say, USD is the main reason, but for us, it was actually, Solaris that was the main feature itself. I think sometimes those get too tied into each other. But we wanted to have a better way to structure light scenes, especially sequence shots in Houdini. And Solaris seemed like the answer to all of our dreams when it comes to that stuff. So that's why we originally, set out to switch.
And so you've decided to use Solaris. Did you run into any challenges during the implementation?
I guess it was mostly, relearning a bunch of things. And then, of course, we had to start kind of from scratch with pipe and tools and stuff, which looking back now, it feels like that was a good thing because we could kind of modernize the way our pipe works. So, yeah, not a whole lot of technical issues.
Excellent. What renderer do you use?
We do Redshift primarily. So we were using Alpha Redshift with Solaris. So we had to lean on them a little bit to get the latest stuff and stuff like that. Good.
Glad that worked out. So what are some of the benefits that you're finding now that you have implemented it?
Well, it's pretty much we have the entire power of Houdini with all FX and everything, and also the top level of Gaffer or Katana, which is such an amazing, powerful package. So we're seeing onboarding artists goes really quick because it's so similar to Nuke. It's blazing fast to do sequence shots. And I mean, I can probably list 10 more things. But
right on. Well, good to hear that it all worked out, and looking forward to seeing what you come out with next. So thanks for joining us and letting us know. If you want to see more of Andreas's talk, it's available online on our YouTube channel as part of the FMX Hive collection. Go watch it. Thanks, Andreas.
Thanks, man.
All right, next up in this Solaris segment, we've got Chris and Ben. Hey, guys.
Hi, Chris.
So let's start with you, Chris. What drove you towards Solaris? Why did you choose to go that path?
Yeah, to be honest, it was the best decision or the best available option for us on the project we had to work on. So we were carefully looking into all the requirements the project needed and quite quickly understood the complexity of it. So we probably could have done it with the traditional workflows and pipelines, which we already had implemented to make the project somehow work. But it would have involved a tremendous amount of additional development and very time-consuming adjustments on our existing pipeline. So luckily for us, Solaris was released during our pre-production phase of the project. So Ben was looking into it a bit. And quite quickly, we actually understood that the USD integration could be the perfect fit for us to deal with all this complexity and also to basically build a completely new pipeline with a very small team in a relatively short amount of time. So, and after a few more in-depth tests, we basically made a decision to fully commit to it.
Great. And so you've committed to it. You're implementing it. What were some of the challenges that you faced along the way, Ben?
Well, initially it was about finding the right way to do it with USD and Solaris, because both offer so many different options, so much flexibility, which of course is great, but still for a pipeline you need to make a decision and define the kind of workflows that work best for us. Took a lot of inspiration from the existing ones from Pixar and DreamWorks, but of course with it being new, we also had to find our own way, something that fits for us especially. So figuring out what would work, and especially starting fresh, we would have to figure out what the overall final big challenges of the project that we would have to deal with would be. So that made the initial question of what to go in terms of like libraries, composition arcs, how to structure assets and all of that, bit of a challenge. But also that's, I would say, a bit of a plus because the flexibility is also really great.
Excellent. Well, speaking of the flexibility, Chris, what would you say are some of the benefits that you found now that it's in place?
Yeah, it's exactly like Ben explained. So definitely the flexibility in it, because during a project, I would say it evolves further over the duration of the production in terms of pipeline. So what happens often is that you suddenly need to implement something new and which was not planned before. So, or the workflow changes to adapt to the needs of the production, or you need new features for the artists so they can work maybe faster or more efficient. So there are usually many reasons that keep the pipeline team very busy during a production. And Solaris is basically allowing us to quickly adapt and restructure if needed. So it could also be over the time that you find better ways or better methods that are more efficient. And in traditional approaches, let's say, I experienced often that once you go fully into production, it becomes very difficult, almost impossible to make big changes in the workflow or in the pipeline. And Solaris made this a lot easier for us.
Excellent. Well, can't wait to see what you accomplish next. And I really recommend everyone to go watch the presentation. It's part of the FMX Hive series available on SideFX.com, so go check it out. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, next up in the Solaris segment, we've got Sun. Hello.
Hello, everybody.
So why did you initially choose to use Solaris?
So that's a very short story, actually. Because Rebellion VFX was only founded about a year ago, and we're a brand new studio, and then myself coming from the Houdini background. So when we founded Rebellion, we thought we're going to build our technology on the latest technology, which is USD, and the Solaris, and provide us the out-of-the-box solutions for USD, and also the Houdini non-destructive workflow really can benefit us for a long term. And that's why we chose Solaris.
Excellent. So you've decided to use it. You're implementing it. What were some of the technical challenges and hurdles that you kind of ran into along the way?
So I think because when we using Solaris, it was like very early stage of the Solaris development, and we picked up like a Karma, probably very early stage, like first version of the Karma when it comes release. And the biggest challenge when we started the project, we have to do a lot of profiling and testing towards the renderer, and to see if the rendering engine can fit what we need before we invest too much into the tech. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have to face in. And at the end, because the nature of the Rebellion is a game kind of business, we have an expert on GPU, and we invested on GPU render farm. So at the end, for the project that we started, we decided to use a different renderer. But as Karma gets developed now, we are now looking into implementing Karma into our pipeline for the next project as well.
Right on. So you've got Solaris implemented. What are some of the benefits that you're finding from using that workflow?
I think from a Rebellion perspective, because we are speaking for smaller game studio, a film studio, a VFX studio, as we team about 30 people. And one key thing for us is really the flexibility and the non-destructive workflow that Solaris really gives to us. As the example that we implemented department layers into the workflow. So each department have their own layers. So for example, we have asset, environment layer, a layout layer, animation, FX, and lighting. And when you publishing something, or one of the department updating something, then that data will flow all the way automatically to the lighting, automatically through our pipeline. For FX department, as example, they don't really need to leave the package. They can just gather the sublayer from the environment team, for example, and working on top of it, and then overlay the data back on top of the environment layer. And that kind of non-destructive workflow and keep everything under the same roof, which is Houdini, really give us the benefits of developing a pipeline, concentrating inside Houdini only.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see what you guys get up to next. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge. And for those out there who haven't seen the FMX presentations on Solaris, go check them out. The FMX Hive is on SideFX.com. So thanks, son. We'll take care.
Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers. Hey, it's Chris from SideFX. I've got here with me Wolfram Neuer. Hello, Wolfram.
Hello. It's nice being here.
Great to have you. So I was on Facebook and I saw your demo art. It really caught my eye, especially because we're always extra interested these days in world building examples. So I contacted you and I wanted you to take us through that scene. So maybe start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm located in Austria, Vienna. I started my career as a 3D artist about 18 years ago. 16 of these years I worked at a company called Repcat, which is a Viennese game art outsourcing and video slot production company, where I had the pleasure to work on productions for Disney, Ubisoft, Blizzard, and IKEA. But I moved slowly away into more project management related positions and didn't do any art for a few years. I didn't like this, so I restarted my career as an artist about 3 years ago. Still at Redcat and happy there, but I'm doing mostly 2D effects and animating 2D content in After Effects and Spine. I'm learning Houdini in my spare time for about 2 years now, and I'm enjoying it a lot. It's a great hobby, but a time-consuming one.
And tell us about the scene.
Yeah, the scene all started with Rebellion Online Environment Workshop. It was a workshop that allowed me to design my own environment, which I found quite compelling. Initially, I really had no plans to do any effects. I just wanted to create some moody scene with some mysterious floating rock structures, but this turned out a little bit boring, so I did some research on how doing effects and stuff like that, and added bit by bit some parts until I liked it.
Very cool. Well, let's have you take us through it, and looking forward to seeing that.
Sure. Okay, let's have a look at the assembly scene of my project. Right now you're seeing just some placeholder geometry instead of trees, just to keep the scene more responsive, and it's easier to see what's happening that way too. In the yellow boxes you will see the actual scatter geometry, the different trees that I used for rendering the scene. I created a pine tree, some oaks, and an alder. And here are the different variations for the different trees. This is the detail level. The trees were created in speed tree. Over here you can see some other kind of vegetation and some stones. This just contains the placeholder geometry that you're seeing right now. These are the boxes for the terrains. I started with this here in the center and then extended it to the front and to the side. And obviously there is some foreground and background geometry too. This box contains the nodes that control the scattering. Pine trees make up the majority of trees. The rendering contains much more trees than you are showing here, that I'm showing you here, but yeah, this is for performance reasons. The nodes on top contain the animated trees, because when the energy explosion is happening, the trees wiggle around a little bit. It's fairly simple. It's just an animated up vector with a multiplier, a random multiplier on top of it. Let's have a look at the VDBs. They look a little bit dense now. I adjusted the density in the shader later on. A simple camera setup. These are the lights that I used to light the scene. It contains a sky dome, a sunlight, a special light for the fog, just to achieve the backlit fog look that I was going for. Here this light is interesting. This is just for the flashes of lights. It's moving around all the time, just so the light is coming from different places. There are some mesh lights too that I will show you later on. There are some disk lights for the moment when the stone comes alive. And here we do have some blocker geometry to darken some areas of the environment. This box contains the different effects. Let's move in a little bit, make the lighting flat, so everything is a little bit more visible. So this is the glow animation, just animated carve node and some animated transforms. This is supported by some energy effects. This is just an animated boolean with some noise on top, and then I used connect adjacent pieces to get this as a result. I used parts of this as an emitter for this energy effect, for this volume explosion. It's a little bit hard to show in the viewport. Here we do have a polysphere. I use this as a mask in Fusion just to distort the background a little bit and do some color corrections for the effects. And this sphere was also used for a second volume explosion effect. So if I blend it in again, you might see it a little bit better. So yeah. But this effect over here was basically just a copy of this one with a slightly modified emitter. There is a crack animation in the stone, some curves with some noise, and the animated clip node did the job. Particles, they should represent some twigs and leaves flying around when the trees are shaking. There is a ground shockwave which looks like this. The density here was adjusted later on as well. And yeah, here we do have the mesh lights, which were converted from this volume effects here. Yeah, I think that's all regarding the scene. For me, the most challenging part was the effect design itself and finding the right pacing for it. The first few approaches looked much more different than that one right now. It included more electricity, blue flames, and stuff like that, but it didn't work out, so it had to go.
Hello, everyone. It's Fiona here from marketing at SideFX, and I have a guest with me today who has a reputation for speaking very fast, being extremely intimidating, and will fill up notebooks like you cannot even imagine, and not just with random scribbling. This guest has been at the company, I don't actually know how long, so we'll ask him today, but he is one of the integral, I guess, pillars of the development at SideFX for Houdini. And well, you can blame him or love him for the stuff that he does. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jeff Lait to our HEX episode. And we're going to get a feel for what's it like to be a developer at SideFX, and also being in the position that he is in, what kind of whip he cracks on the other developers. So with that, Jeff Lait.
Thank you very much, Fiona. That's a very generous introduction. I don't know how you can tell
true.
It's not random scribbles, because I don't think anyone can read my handwriting. So, I mean, I know I can't. So it could be scribbles for all you know in those notebooks that I present.
So those notebooks, by the way, if you guys are all wondering, you probably are. When Lait attends SIGGRAPH, for example, he will, I don't know how many presentations you go through in the day of white papers, but he will fill up entire notebooks and just remember everything. Like, his brain capacity is, I don't know, like, scary. And that is probably also why he's one of the main software architects of Houdini. Because the rest of us normal people can't handle that amount of data. So tell us actually how you got started at SideFX.
Yeah, I started off at Waterloo. I was taking pure mathematics and computer science, but I'd done a lot of programming on my own prior to that. And my first co-op term ended up being with Corel, who makes photo paint. And that was quite exciting for me, because I was into image processing. I had a 24-bit graphics card, and I had done all the assembly program required to be able to do blur kernels and stuff like that on it, which is was really exciting in those days. So I worked on photo paint for, I guess, 3 work terms, and then I decided it's been 3 terms at this company, I should go somewhere else. And my original goal was actually Autodesk, because Jurassic Park and things like that. It was very exciting to work at Maya. But then when I just applied for all the different companies, there was this one company I didn't know about before called SideFX, and they interviewed me as well. And it was very interesting because
who was it that interviewed?
Paul Salvini.
Okay.
He was the CTO at the time, and all the demo reels shown by Maya and SideFX, etc., were all extremely similar, because people were using all the software to do stuff, and so that's all the software got to show up on all the same demo reel material. But when they offered me a job at SideFX, I actually really liked it, because it was a small company, and I had been working at a place where at Corel they promised me I'd be able to meet the founder, because he shook the hands and talked to every single co-op that joined, until the year I joined. That's when he stopped. And so this was one where the founder was still there, and I would be able to actually talk to him directly. So I thought I'd try what that experience was like. And then after some time in this procedural world, I have become a true believer in proceduralism. So now I've spent the ensuing decades just trying to create artist tools that let artists be able to use computers as a new type of artistic medium. Because what computers are is they're things that compute. So if you use a computer as a paintbrush, it's not fully applying the power of what they've opened up as a novel form of art. And it's proceduralism, where you're actually starting to use this computer in a way that was not possible with other types of art we have. And so I'm just overjoyed to see all the amazing things people can do with the software I've helped to work on.
I'm just kind of blown that you potentially could have been at Alias Wavefront. You meant Alias Wavefront, by the way.
Yes, I forgot their name
before
at the time.
the acquisition.
Yeah, it was like 3 acquisitions ago. That's true.
Yes. So wow, cool. So then, when you were starting out at SideFX on the co-op term, what did you work on?
Yeah, so I started off, and I think Kristen was the one that told me to get ray intersection with NURBS to work better. I forget which one. And so I immediately started working on there and wrote a lot of bugs that have plagued me to this day. Some of that code is still active. And after that, I worked on trim curves, because we really wanted to have a premier NURB solution. So we needed to have good trim curves with surface intersection and all those hard problems. But as we know then, of course, Pixar released Jerry's Game, and we all discovered subdivision surfaces were a lot easier to work with than trying to explain to artists basis functions and rational B-splines. Now, I still love rational B-splines, and we were just talking about a SOP today with curves, and people were like, I need to make a circular arc. And I'm like, well, if it's a rational B-spline, you can make a perfect circular arc, with only degree 2. And they're like, yes, that's interesting, Jeff, but we're not going to do that. We're not going back to rational world. For those of you wondering, this is when your points have a W in addition to an X, Y, and Z, just to make things much more confusing. And until around Houdini 12, all of our points always had a W on them. There's usually 1 all the time for everything you did, but occasionally it wouldn't be 1 and cause problems for you. You'd send in a bug report, and we'd come back and say, that's because your W's aren't always 1. With the new geometry library, we eventually managed to get rid of W by default. So all your points are now just X, Y, and Z. But there's still ways to get a W to show up in there if you want to.
Like an Easter egg. So then how did you migrate from NURBS land to be the DOPS guy, basically?
Yeah, well, the DOPS project was started with Mark Tucker at the helm, and who's now, of course, leading Solaris. And then he left for a few years, which then I ended up becoming a DOP guy as a result of that. By the time we were all working on it, trying to produce cloth, RBD, and other solvers within the DOP framework.
So going back to the notebook taking, because that's actually, it's a joke and everything about how you fill it up. But on the serious note, you attend SIGGRAPH events to, basically go to the market to find the best solutions that you can implement into the product so that people can have a better time, achieving effects and creating visual results. So how do you go about picking what white papers and what things to look at?
Yeah, well, I really see SIGGRAPH as a professional development time. So it is a real chance to focus on broadening one's horizons too. Because if you look at where a lot of the advancements happen, they are from a synergy between different areas. So if you focus just on fluids, you're going to miss out on a lot of what can happen. And we actually have this because I'm focusing just on graphics. I'm missing out on a lot. And one of the complaints sometimes people have is there's these SIGGRAPH papers, and all this does is introduce the graphics community, something that's been known since the 70s and this other community. And I've always sort of thought, well, so that's a good thing to do. I mean, how else will it get into this community, right? Someone has to, bring it over. So SIGGRAPH is this wonderfully concentrated event with these really well done talks and technical papers on a wide range of subjects, from additive manufacturing to trying to solve any of the graphics problems that sort of exist. And so I tend to try and get a wide variety, because what I find always happens with technical papers is if you try and just read them, they're impenetrable. They're filled with jargon. There's equations this long. I have absolutely no idea. I mean,
yeah, you do.
No, I don't. The only reason why you know that is because you have exposed yourself to it enough times. Eventually, you think you understand it. It's like playing any video game where you get in at the start and there's just all this crap on the screen and you have no idea what all the buttons are doing. But then after you played it for a couple of weeks, all of a sudden you're there and you know what everything is. It's the same
after
with trying
you
to watch
500 times. Sorry.
Yeah. So I try and get a variety of papers is usually what I try and do. And so it's not really stuff that's useful usually so much as interesting and might spark some secondary advance somewhere.
Okay, so then can you maybe give a glimpse to people outside how development happens, per dev cycle? Like, how do you guys balance the ratio between the stuff that you've come across in the research papers, and then also what the customers ask for?
Yeah,
and then how do you plan those things, right? Like, some things are small. There's like other projects that are just huge like rewrites. How do you guys decide?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and our primary solution is sort of like a edge-based approach. We try and make a lot of those decisions locally where possible, where the person who is directly involved with the code is the one who can tell which things are possible and which things aren't. So we try and ensure that person knows enough about all the needs of the customers that they're able to make the right choices of what should be worked on and what should not be worked on. And this is like a ongoing problem, because we have a deluge of bugs and RFEs that come in all the time, which are all very important. RFEs being requests for enhancements. And it's often a slippery line between those two things, like a bug versus an RFE. Does it really matter where it lines? What's really important is how does it affect the artist at the end, and how much does it impact their ability to produce great art? And so you're looking at what comes in there, trying to judge versus the long-term projects you're trying to get, and make a judgment call. For how to do long-term projects, usually the logic is to try and set up what your long-term goal is, and then take a series of steps in that goal. So I had an analogy I made a while ago trying to explain this, which is that you're sort of like lost in a forest, and you want to get out of the forest, to your new magical solver or something. And so you take a site into the east, because that's the direction you need to go in. But a forest has trees everywhere. If you just try and walk east, you're not going to walk east. You're going to have to be forced to move back and forth. So usually what you do is you take a local site into somewhere close. And so you find some incremental thing that will get you closer to where you want to be, but is itself a worthy target you can focus on. So you get there and you solve that earlier problem. And when you get near that problem, you might choose, okay, we don't want to fully solve this problem because it's not important enough, so let's take another site and farther off. But you might also discover that solution is actually so useful, you need to explore it more and spend some time around that tree, cementing that particular solution. So this is how we end up with this iterative model, where we have these long-term goals, but you will see us focusing on polishing things in between, and sometimes not polishing things in between because we're trying to get to the long-term goal faster, and the in-between thing isn't seen as important as a long-term goal is.
So it's not that it's like neglect or something when people come across things and they wonder, like, why a certain tool doesn't exist. It's just time constraints and wandering through forest, basically.
Exactly. You have to pick which trees you go towards, and unfortunately, there's so many good trees that we don't walk towards because we only have so many directions we can go in at once, right?
True. So I don't know about any sort of like last points that you want to mention about being a senior software architect, right? That's who you are today, and kind of being like the gatekeeper of the product for so many different areas, actually, not just DOPS.
I don't know. It's hard to imagine that because I try not to, I guess, be a gatekeeper. It's like that's this top-down, strong top-down view that most people have of development, and it has its uses for how you want, like which direction you want to go in, but how you actually get there. There's so many of these local decisions that have to be made, and the person at the top cannot make those decisions. The only way I can find out how someone should solve a problem is to know everything they know about the problem, which means that if they tell that to me, why can't they have solved the problem there? Because they already had all the information, right? So it's like, when is it that the person higher up has information that people lower down don't have, is when they should become involved. But for a lot of things that happen in the world, most of them are local decisions that you should solve locally with local information.
Yes, I didn't intend to make it sounding like you're perched on some high tower. It's just that I guess I mean to say that there's a lot of responsibility that you are, daily conscious about and making decisions towards, what step to take. And it's not a small task. And I guess it's very impressive the amount of decisions that you have to make like each day as not only just like programmer, but you're also thinking about the users as well. And you yourself are also user.
Thankfully, I don't make all the decisions for the user about the users, right? The users make a lot of those decisions because they've sent them to us. And we also have, we work with teams here. So we meet in groups to discuss how to go forward with dynamics. So if we want to work on the Pyro solver and want to determine how parameters are laid out, it's not me that has to make all the decisions of how it's laid out. It's a group working together, which allows for a lot of different diverse voices of how to use it. Because we need to have people that actually, do Pyro every day there in the group talking about, what nodes are more important than other ones. Otherwise, we'd end up with these highly technical, abstract things that I like as a mathematician, but artists do not like. So instead, I've spent most of my time trying to understand more what the artists like, so that I can produce stuff that they're happy with the first time. And that's sort of always my goal, is to predict their requirements. But I'm of course not correct, and I often get feedback of like, no, the only mathematician would love that. And I'm like, okay, I guess I still haven't learned yet. But that humility is an important part of the process.
All very true.
You've seen the stuff I put in.
What's that?
You've seen the stuff I put in that doesn't make it out. It's like.
Yes, I've ambushed you on the train one time about one of them, if you recall. Well, with that, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us and give us a glimpse of what it's like to be a developer at SideFX. Well, I guess at some point I'll see you in the office.
Yeah, I hope that comes soon.
Ciao.
See you. Thank you.
Hey, it's Chris from SideFX. I'm here with Rob and Simon. So in the last episode of HEX, we talked about Project Titan, and that was for the first time, and we told you about it. And so if you haven't seen that, feel free to go back to that episode. We're going to give you a quick update on where we're at with Titan now. So over to Rob.
Thanks, Chris. So we're moving along. We have finished up some previs on Titan. So we took some layout that Simon had done that he'll probably talk about a little bit, but I brought it in to Houdini and we just prevised out a few shots. We're keeping it small. There's only 4 or 5 shots. We're not a big team. We're not a big studio. So we wanted to have something like we could handle. And of course, the ultimate goal is to make sure that not only do we have beautiful images, but we also have some great tutorials that we can share with the community. So right now we're working on things like getting some of the Kitbash assets into USD. This ultimately is going to be rendered in Solaris and Karma. And so, yeah, we're moving along. We have some pipeline things we're also dealing with, which I think are also going to be some great tutorials, because we're dealing with things like working on Google Drive. How do multiple people from multiple locations with essentially separate pipelines sync all of their data, all of their assets together? So we're looking at things like using Git, using Google Drive, and incorporating that into some sort of a PDG workflow and so on. So we're moving along.
Thanks, Rob. How you doing, Simon?
Thanks, Chris. On the real-time side, we have building some tools. So we have used some Kitbash assets and some other assets, and we want to optimize them to make them more game-friendly. So we are building a system that is also using PDG to optimize assets automatically. So if we have a certain amount of assets, we can automatically run them to a system that outputs a more optimized version, for example, with trim textures, and also reducing the poly count. So it's more optimized to using game engines. So within these assets, these are mainly for buildings. We also then use that in a building tool. So we have a building generator based on certain blockouts an artist can make. We'll then automatically place these assets on those blockouts. So if we place blocks, we automatically have a house generated on the blocks there. The house generator itself also works based on a pattern. So we can say I want a bookstore next to a restaurant next to a hotel. So we fill in a certain pattern like 1, 2, 3, and it will automatically try to repeat that along the way. So with those houses in place, we also started developing a road tool. So based on Unreal splines, we can generate procedural roads. So we can just draw curves, and then we have road system. What is special here is that we can actually give certain properties in Unreal on these splines. So we can have a road for bikes, or a single road, or double road. So we can have some interesting information here to work with and specifically create a certain road or lanes that you want to see. So next step would be then more polishing these tools, of course, and already starting building our first level for our game. So that was a quick update here. So back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Simon. So a couple of weeks ago, we put out the word that we're looking for artists in the community to work with. We had a lot of interest, so thank you very much for submitting, whoever did. We're going through those and kind of trying to figure out what we need on the project and who's available and that kind of thing. So you may hear from us. You may not, but thank you for entering your interest. And we'll give you an update on Titan next month. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Today you held an open house event for students interested in learning Houdini. Tell us about the event and about the programs you're offering to students.
That's right. We held a quick webinar where we interviewed some ex-escapees about their experience learning Houdini at Escape, and also about the courses that we provide. So we provide 2 Houdini courses, one full-time, one of 6 weeks, and one part-time, one of 12 weeks. And in both courses, we teach you sort of the paradigm of learning Houdini, and also to do all the effects, which is Houdini's famous for, sort of the rigid bodies, the pyro, the water, the explosions, the cloth simulations, and that kind of thing.
That sounds great. Now, during your webinar, I noticed that you asked your former students why they chose to learn Houdini. What were some of their responses?
Yes, that question definitely came up. There were some very interesting responses. We had a guy from an architectural background who he actually did the games course first. And during that, he had to process lots of different assets using lots of different software. And he discovered the labs tools in Houdini, actually. And they sped up a lot of his workflows and gave him reusable tools. And that's what inspired him. He wanted to make his own reusable tools to speed up his architectural workflows. A couple of the other students actually came in, and they started off as modeling. They wanted to be modelers. But when they started learning about VFX, they suddenly realized Houdini was the tool of choice for making explosions and water, and that really inspired them. So that's what pushed them in that particular direction.
One important question that I think any student who's developing a new skill asks is, will this get me a job? What employment opportunities do you see waiting for students who take your course?
Oh, that question came up definitely, because a couple of the people we spoke to have been working in industry for a while, and definitely it will get you a job. There's a huge amount of demand for Houdini work at the minute. As we all know, we've just been under lockdown for COVID, and production stalled for a little bit. So industry needs to catch up with that work, plus all the new exciting projects that are on the slate for the future. So there's a ridiculous amount of demand. So we can't produce the students quick enough. And actually, Thierry, one of the panelists, gave us his experience since he left Escape a few years ago. He actually flew straight out from the course to Montreal to be trained up as a VFX artist, and he's been working in the industry ever since. So there's some great opportunities, particularly at the moment.
Well, that sounds great, Mark. Thanks for spending some time with us today. We'll be sure to put a link under the video for anyone who wants to go and check out your course. And what kind of information can they get on the website to help them sign up?
Thank you for that. Yeah, well, the link to the website is a good thing, because that'll give you all the information about the different courses that we provide. And more importantly, you'll find links to taster days and open days, which we're holding at the moment virtually, but hopefully soon now London's opening up. If you're in London, you can obviously come down to see us in person. But the idea of the taster days and open days is to get an actual idea and experience of the teaching style and the quality of teaching at Escape. So certainly come along the website and certainly sign up for one of those, so you can get an idea of what the Escape experience is actually like. So yes.
Sounds great. Well, thanks a lot, Mark, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you very much. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Hey everyone, it's Ben with SideFX, and today I'm talking to Nick Owens of Penryn Games. How you doing today, Nick?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Penryn Games?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been in the game industry for about 15 years now. I started with development, and then I went into production and also design. So I've been in a variety of roles in the industry. And now I sort of consider myself a Houdini environment artist because that's how I spend most of my time. But since I work for an indie company, I kind of do a lot of different things. But with my background, I feel like Houdini is sort of like an ideal tool for what we've been doing because it's a little bit technical and a little bit of an artist tool. So it's been awesome for our team. And yeah, the indie team that I'm working on now is Penryn Games, and it's just me and two other of my friends that we sort of shared a vision for this game we wanted to make and got together to make it.
And the game you're working on is called Frameshift. Can you tell us a little bit about Frameshift?
That's right. Yeah, Frameshift. It's a multiplayer open world survival game, and it's set in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi environment. If you've ever seen the work of Simon Stålenhag or movies like District 9 or Elysium, it's sort of going for that everyday look with this super high-tech sci-fi layer on top. So it's like this apocalyptic world, but then it has like a lot of high-tech sci-fi stuff in it.
And can you kind of give us an overview of how you're using Houdini to make the game?
Yeah, sure. So we have a few tools for utility type of stuff like creating atlases and baking trees to build boards or combining or lotting meshes, but the majority of the tools we have are for world building. So we use Houdini for pretty much everything for world building. All of the organic environment, so erosion, we use the Gaia plugin for erosion, rivers and the flow map generation for rivers and even the foam on the rivers. Generating lakes, we generate the coastline mesh, and also we did the simulation for the breaking waves and open ocean in Houdini using Flip. And then we generate the terrain textures, the texture splats with Houdini as well. We also use the height map scatter tools for vegetation and rocks and debris, and even VFX, like in the rivers, we scatter the splash VFX, which is also created in Houdini using flips and then baked out to textures for use in Houdini. We also generate cliff meshes for this kind of steep areas in the game. So everything in the organic environment, and then we sort of like, we have all the man-made stuff like roads and intersections. We have like a causeway bridge created in Houdini and arch bridge, and then different types of crossings. So if a river crosses a road, there can be a washout, so it like is a destroyed road because it's the apocalypse, or a stone bridge, or like culverts. And then we have a tunnel tool. We also do all of our terrain grading and blending in Houdini to blend the terrain in with the cities or the roads. And we have a route generator that uses find shortest path to sort of just automatically create a road. We have a street network generator that creates like the footprint of a city and the city like grid layout basically, and then a city block generator which will pack the city block with buildings and in the space in between it creates parking lots and parks, and it has like curbs and sidewalks and all that stuff. And then the building generator just sort of puts in the modular pieces and generates a building of any height, and a strip mall generator where we use Houdini to generate the signs, the meshes for the text signs using input data from a CSV, which is really nice. You don't have to model 100 signs. And then because our world is sort of like this ordinary world with the sci-fi layer on top, we use Houdini for kind of these creepy sci-fi tools that basically like it's this technology that's taken over. So we have like this sort of technological tentacle thing, and it spawns out of technology and then kind of creeps over the world. So we use I use Python states in that tool, which makes it really easy to just define a location where this technology is taken over, and then you can click around in the environment to define using the Python states where the tentacles end up. And then I'm working now on adding VFX for that. So there's these egg sacs, like these gross egg sacs in the tentacle tool that hatch, and I want to use vellum and stuff to make a disgusting sim for that. So that's kind of like the overview of how we use it for environment.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Nice work. And you're building the game in the Unity game engine. Can you tell us just a little bit about using Houdini and Unity together, kind of how you bring the assets into Unity?
Yeah, we use Houdini engine to do that, but we sort of have our own layer of tooling on top to interact with the HDA itself and do all of it kicks off all the baking or recooking and stuff like that. So we definitely use Houdini engine, but it's in our own pipeline, basically.
And are people able to play Frameshift? Is there any kind of beta test they can join?
Yeah. I was gonna say, if you're a gamer, I'll give you a key for sure for the next alpha test, and anybody can go to frameshiftgame.com right now and sign up for our next alpha test. We don't quite have a date yet, but we'll keep you posted.
All right, thanks a lot for doing this, Nick, and we're looking forward to playing Frameshift.
Thanks, Ben.